Hi guys, welcome back to the channel with my good friend today, Dr. Mark Bull. Mark is a biomechanist, so I've been able to work with Mark for the last 10 years or so, helped a lot with players and understanding how they move, and then ultimately creating a plan to help them get better based on, what's the best for them. So today, I have the luxury of having Mark here, and we're gonna look at the trail arm in transition because it seems to be a topic that lots of people are asking about. I wanted to give you some very detailed description of what we're looking at.
Thanks, Tyler. It really is a pleasure being here today. And it's nice to wear shorts. So from England, this is a nice experience. So thank you for arranging the sun as well. So yes, as far as the trail arm, I mean, you can look at this in many ways. For example, how we move in the golf swing, the actual movement side of movement. Perhaps the trail arm is the most influential segment we have. You can obviously explore the ground reaction forces, the pelvis, for example, the eyes, all these other wonderful areas around why we move the way we do. But within, say, for example, just the actual movement kinematics, how that kind of trail arm moves is perhaps the most influential segment for many, many reasons. So really understand, I think, as you say, some very playful references, to kind of guide your viewers in particular, for example, to maybe encourage movements or avoid movements. It's a wonderful one to explore and play with.
Yeah, and I would say very common area that players struggle to find, right? Like especially good players, higher handicaps, it always seems like there's a next level when it comes to how we can move that a little bit better.
For sure. And again, you kind of look at it for many reasons. Just the idea of shape change, look at what the spine goes through in golf, or even the great thing with arms, all being well, we have two. We can compare arms in a lovely way in golf. You look at the lead arm, typically until post-impact, of course, the kind of lead arm will go through minimal change in shape.
Okay.
Obviously, there's movements through the forearm, the elbow, and the wrist and the shoulder joint, but there's not tremendous change in shape in the arm. The trail arm is very different from its, say, start position to kind of how it moves in the swing. There's tremendous shape change. So how the arm, in essence, changes shape and moves can really influence, for example, what you experience, say, through lower limb, foot and ankle, the pelvis, the spine example. So just having those lovely playful references to kind of almost aspire towards can be a really a very intuitive way and a very helpful way to really actually encourage how all segments move in the golf swing. So I kind of say to most people in a very fun way, thankfully we don't need to, of course, but if you had to choose one segment to move well, kind of make it the trail arm.
I love it. So if I'm in here, let's give them a couple references.
For sure. So even say from the target line view, so if you just take your start position there from me, Tyler, and then just maybe explore and transition initially. So let's almost use a very common example you may see, say for example, some of your viewers and some of the people you have the pleasure of working with. Just go to your top of your backswing and stop. So as they move in transition, a very common move that often Tyler and myself may see is the elbow actually moves further behind the shoulder joint in transition. And that can be coupled with or connected with, Tyler, things, for example, say the hand path being too far beneath them, the shaft plane getting too, we keep it very informal language, say getting too steep in transition, very narrow, lack of rotation, and even in some ways how the trail arm moves can then really stimulate, for example, how the player then starts to move, say, through the ground in terms of ground reaction forces. So a reference you can use, just take that start position and just go to your top of your backswing once again. It's being very mindful as you move in transition around about kind of lead arm parallel, which is kind of loosely speaking at this point in time here, the elbow sits beneath the shoulder joint. So that long bone, the long humerus, crudely speaking, hangs vertically downwards rather than the elbow sits behind the shoulder joint. And even if you can, as best you can, Ty, kind of give your feedback on this. When I push the elbow behind you, the joint feels a little bit kind of loose and almost kind of disconnected in some ways.
No man's land. I don't know where it is,
But when the elbow sits on the shoulder joint, the scapula, the big shoulder blade at the back, sits on the rib cage, and hopefully it's more connected, more pressure within that trail shoulder.
Yeah, and that's like a super interesting one because everyone wants to feel, they would say more connected. And that usually means that they're going to try to keep everything tight, where just by moving my arm down, I felt like a great connection in my back.
And I think it's worthwhile, before we look at the face-on view for your viewers, there's a tremendous difference in connection and compression. A lot of people see connection as this. That's compression, which is a huge constraint, for example, on how we rotate. This can be a wonderfully connected arm, despite the very visible space we have, because connection really goes back to how well the scapula, the shoulder blade, moves and sits and interacts with the rib cage. So it just goes to that once again, Tyler, and we'll look at it face on. Top of backswing and stop. When we kind of move the elbow behind us, The scapula in some ways almost elevates and lifts off the rib cage, disconnection. When the elbow sits more beneath the shoulder, around about lead arm parallel, the scapula then sits more on that rib cage, which is more aligned anatomically with what you would then see, Ty, as being connected.
Right. And then from there, I mean, you're pretty close to impact at that point. So if this is in a good spot, odds are better that we're going to be able to make a good strike.
Absolutely right. So from the face-on view, so allow me just to change position for your viewers. So if you now face the camera, so you can hit, in essence, down the range, just top of backswing and stop. So a very playful one you can explore is as you move in downswing, allow the elbow to move in front of the trail hip before the trail wrist. So from that face-on view, around about here again, in Tyler's case, the elbow's in front of the hip joint in advance of the wrist. If I took a line down here, Ty, for example, through the wrist, it would be behind the elbow joint. What's very common to see in some players as they move in transition, so apologies for being in the way, as they move in transition, how the wrist gets there before the elbow, therefore the elbow sits behind that wrist joint. So using the elbow to lead the wrist into impact, elbow to hip before the hand, can be, again, a very playful way of exploring the trail arm in transition.
And obviously there's going to be a big chain reaction that happens, and we usually hear the description, oh, I feel like this is happening at impact, but lots of times it's before that, it's actually when the issue is happening.
Massively. You can look at it this way, that the most important event in golf would be impact. Our biggest influence is perhaps our intention, but the most influential move is transition. So impact is the most important event. We can be very precise, the impact interval, if someone is more aware of, say, for example, how the club moves through impact. But the most influential move for sure is transition, because in many ways, what you and I would experience and observe at impact is just in response to how we move in transition. So to get good at this, we've got to get good at that.
I love it. I love it. So use those references. Usually a mirror, probably a good place to start. And then you can get some feels on if that's an area that you're not sure of, where you need to be in transition and how that arm's moving. Use those references. Always start slow. We like doing a lot of pitching, wedge shots. Use that to integrate that movement into your swing, and then hopefully that helps you hit it a little bit better. Thanks so much, Mark, for joining the channel.
My pleasure, Ty.